Okay, so the purpose of today is to show you what we've seen in the new 2019 beta software, and that we would want to show you what's different from 2018 and provide tips and advice and answer your questions about anything that has changed and provide general just
Yeah, I think that's tips. It pretty much. Yeah, okay.
So the main thing that's changed is that the main supported development environment is switched towards Visual Studio Code, and we mainly used Eclipse, and so that's a big difference.
Yeah, for the previous, yeah.
And the compiling and build changed to Gradle, and other minor fixes.
Yeah, just important to note, it's been implemented through Gradle Rio, which is a it was community made. It's been pulled under the WPI lib umbrella. So, Visual Studio Code. So this is the new supported environment for 2019, and it's important to note it is a source code editor, not an IDE, and this is a different environment from Eclipse, different layout, it behaves differently, and the way you interact is a bit different, so it's important to get used to it and be prepared for it, because it is a bit different, and it will take some getting used to. And so the advice we have is that to use extensions to improve your coding experience. This will be covered later, but it really improves it if you use extensions. We'll label a few that we think are quite helpful. It'll definitely make it much easier for you to use. Yeah. So the install process. It's a bit different to previous years. So it involves an offline install, which installs a WPI lib specific version of VS Code. And so it sets some settings such as disabling automatic updates, it installs its own version of the Java JDK without overriding Java Home. And it's important to note, this is quite different to previous years, and we favour this change. The install installs everything into a year-named folder. So example, C/users/public FRC 2019. And so this means the 2020 install won't override anything from 2019. All 2019 code will still work, including separate versions of VS Code. I reckon this is a pretty positive change.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Means you can access the different years. You access the years separately, and yeah,
it makes it much easier to do it anyway. So, what is included? So, it comes with a bunch of things. It installs a very nice install. It comes with Visual Studio Code, which of course supported IDE 2019. Which is a separate instance. So, even if you already downloaded Visual Studio Code, it will install a separate version, and it will be kept separate, which is important to note. Comes with a C++ compiler. It comes with Gradle, the Gradle they use, the version for deploying C++ or Java robot code. It comes with Java JDK/JRE, so it's a specific version that's used to build Java robot code and to run any Java-based tools, for example, a Smart Dashboard. It's important to note that this exists side by side with any existing JDK installs, and so it won't overwrite any Java Home variable, so that shouldn't cause issues for you, which is good. It comes with all the tools you've expected from WPI Lab, such as Smart Dashboard, Shuffleboard, Robot Viewer, Outline Viewer, and new ones such as Path Weaver. And it comes with WPI Lab dependencies such as OpenCV, etc., as well as some default Visual Studio Code extensions, which are extensions for code development, VS Code, which do help quite significantly with coding your robot required. So, launching. Do you want to discuss this?
Oh, yeah. So, the Visual Studio Code, the good thing it is added now is that you can quickly launch it from command prompt. You just have to type in FRC code 2019 and it will launch it up there, which I think is an improvement and is much quicker at times.
It's very rapid start. Like Eclipse, if you used to Eclipse, it's very slow to get going. It takes a while. So you type it in or you click on it and it just opens immediately, and it's very fast.
And the shortcut on desktop, of course, is...
But it's good to note with the 2019, we believe next year will probably be like 2020, 2021. That will open a specific instance, and so that's helpful if you want to make sure you get the right year installed for future.
Yeah, it goes in line with the separate files when it's installed.
Yeah. So extensions. So an issue we had when we first started was that since it's like a source code editor, we couldn't really see like packages of like reference libraries, like dependencies. This has been an issue, and so what we found, and this we suggest you do as well, is to install the extension Java Dependency Viewer. And so once it's the extension, you sort of type into Visual Studio Code under extensions that name that you see there, and it'll pop up. You install it by Microsoft. It's a very nice extension, and it will appear as a tab on the side, displaying files, packages, as you can see here with our one we have here. And now the word we got was WPL may decide to include this in the final release by default, but when we tested, it wasn't included, and it really helped us because previously the only way to really view code, to view WPL classes and to view our custom libraries, was to actually in our code type in the code and open the declaration of say a class, whereas this you actually go and view by package, and so it really actually helped, and we suggest strongly you use this. This is probably one of our favorite extensions we found to use. So now, here's something that's quite different, and this is adding third-party libraries to the build path. So previously, using Eclipse, it was handled using the Java build path section in properties. So how is this handled using Visual Studio Code? So as you can see, this is how we did it in previous years. So it's a bit different. So adding third-party library, example NavX or CTRE, this is quite a nice process. It's very simple. So after the vendor library has been stored, you right-click on the build.gradle file in the project tree, and then select Manage Vendor Libraries. Then from that, you can select in the menu, which you can see, Install New Libraries offline from menu top of screen, and then tick the box for the vendor libraries you wish to install. And so, do you agree? It's a very easy process.
Yeah, I think compared to what was needed to be done on Eclipse, this is a lot more straightforward and easier to understand than having to go into properties and looking at external jars and things like that. For Eclipse, it's less jarring and less sort of confronting for new programmers.
I agree. But this gets into the issue of external jars. And so we're a team, we have our custom libraries that we use heavily as Arachne, and other teams do as well. And so the issue is, if you use external jars, how do you integrate these into your code? Just have an audio issue.
Yeah, I don't think they can hear us when we say audio issue.
Okay, I think we've been told by the man in our ear that we're back. And so, anyway, back to where we were. So the switch to Gradle and the move away from Eclipse means...
I think we've lost audio.
Okay. Means that external jars have to be handled differently. And so, vendor libraries, they've already been handled, as we described. It's quite easy, quite simple process. However, this process here is much more difficult. So the approach tutorial we have, and this is how we did it, is so firstly, create a folder called libs in the robot project and place your external jars there. So there we have our Arachne library, which is publicly available. And it doesn't have to be called libs, but it's quite simple and explanatory, like libraries, so that's what we suggest. Then you need to go to the build.properties file, and you need to add the code, compile file tree, directory libs, include .jar. So what this does is essentially it tells the compiler, it tells Gradle that in the libs folder, to add every file to as a dependency to the to the build path, that has a .jar extension file name, and so that is the solution that we found, and it worked quite well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a bit more complex, and there will be other code in dependencies. We just move this for the sake of ease of use to see that's the line you need to add.
Yeah.
But this gets to the question of source code. So it's missing. When you do this, you notice there's no source code. So your dependency source code isn't visible in the robot project. And so this is one limitation of the new system. And so the advice we received was to get, if you have your own custom libraries, the advice we received was to publish the library to Maven and then pull them down in all robot projects. Now, a Maven publisher is required to link sources to an external jar. And so this is something we are still working on as a team, but there's probably other approaches. It's just this is one device we were given, and we're still looking into it, but we haven't been able to get it to work as of yet. But if you are running your own external jars, we suggest this is the approach that you should use.
Yeah.
Are we?
I think the live stream just died.
Is there?
No, I think it's back.
Is back? Okay. Sorry, we just had issues. Okay, so just to reiterate, not quite sure, but with source code, if you have your own external jars, we were told that you have to use a device we received was that a maven publisher is required to link sources to an external jar. And we haven't been able to do it currently, we're still working on it. But if you are doing it yourself, then this is something that we suggest. I think move on. Okay. I think we'll move on to the next section. I'm not sure about live stream issues, but anyway. So Gradle. So for those of you that don't know what Gradle is an open source build automation tool. And so what this is that, like, sort of in simple terms, when you run your code, like when you click build robot code, Gradle manages compilation, the deploy, etc. It handles the building of it. And so the code builds using Gradle from 2018 onwards. And for those of you that have done FTC or made Android apps, you would know that Gradle is used in FTC, and you sort of get how it works. And so WPI Lib specifically is using Gradle Rio to try and get Gradle to work. So just a quick overview. And you noticed earlier when you mentioned like build-up properties for external jars, that was using like in Gradle as well. So it handles all the build path, and it's quite useful. Okay. Do you want to go into this or?
You can explain.
So this is a change we detected, we discovered, and it's kind of a big one for some teams. So, but not too significant. So using custom sensors. So for those of you that have written custom sensors, like a car sensor, like a non-robotics car sensor, you would have noticed that previously most sensor classes, such as gyro base, extended sensor base. So now this class used to extend sendable base, but inside this class it contained several static functions. And so sensor base has been replaced entirely by sensible base, which of course sensor base used to extend. And so now if you go back, if you look in the code from on build day one build season, you notice that classes such as gyro base extend sendable base. And so these static functions have been moved to sensor utility. And so what this means is that if you're making custom sensor, such as a monobox car sensor, you need to switch what you extend to sendable base, since sensor base no longer exists. And if you used the static functions that existed in sensor base, then you need to use sensor utility to access these same functions. So us personally, for our team personally, we changed our car sensor code to extend sensible base, which moved all errors in the code, but we had long since removed actual car sensor from a robot. So we weren't able to test had been fixed, but it fixed all the errors really. But again, we're not sure if it worked, but WPI people seem to agree with us. That was the correct approach, and this should fix your issues if you are using custom sensors for next season. So just a little note on Pathweaver. So it's a new trajectory generation tool which is included with WPI Lib install. So at the time of testing, it lacked documentation, so it was kind of hard to test. But it outputs points with an x, a y, a position on the curve, a velocity, an acceleration, a jerk, a heading, and a time step. So we were unable to find WPI Lib classes using these points, and we suggest using your own tool or something such as Pathfinder to utilize these points. So for more information on sort of like this sort of motion tracking stuff, that's the word to use. 254 delivered an excellent presentation in 2015 at Champs. But just note, if you're wondering what that is at the start of build season, which is new, that's sort of what it is.
So we also tested Shuffleboard as part of the embedded test. Now, we haven't used Shuffleboard for our main system so far.
In the past.
In the past, yeah. We've mainly used Smart Dashboard, but from what we've gathered, shuffleboard hasn't changed too much, but here are the things that still happens when we used it. So when we connected it to the robot, it automatically loads up the motor controllers and solenoids, and we could control individual motor controllers and solenoids and test individual ones. So we could have a minus and plus power value to the motor controllers, and solenoids would be a true or false. Then for us, there were two tabs that loaded up on default, so we live window and smart dashboard. And within those two tabs, widgets could be arranged throughout it and added from the networks tab, pull out table where it would list out the things it's connected to on the robot. Sensors, so like encoder values, could also be viewed through a widget that could be changed from a graph to a number view. So from what we've gathered, it hasn't changed too much and it seems to work rather well, and just work reliably.
Yeah.
And just on that, launching Shuffleboard, we've noticed from Visual Studio Code is quite easy actually. There is this little button on VS Code where it would open up a WPIlib command prompt, and from there you can start the tool of Shuffleboard. So that's a thing to note. You can quickly start out Shuffleboard and check through there, instead of having to open up Driver Station and load up Smart Dashboard, say, from there.
Sort of like with Eclipse, how you could load up like Smart Dashboard, Shuffleboard direct from the toolbar.
Oh, yeah.
It's similar. It works similar, and you'll get used to it very quickly. So I think that is all we really have for today. So any questions, and we expect definitely will be some questions, hopefully.
Yeah.
We can hope. So any questions? When I start, what was a challenging thing you found? Like something that like you weren't sure about how to do, Darren?
I guess VS Code. Since we're used to Eclipse and using that whole IDE, using VS Code was a bit different and was a bit of a learning curve, especially with the extensions. But it was pretty easy to pick up and implement and read. So that's pretty cool.
Just a reminder, if you have any questions,
please type that in the chat.
Yes. We would love to answer as many questions as possible in the time we have. Let's just check. I'm a big fan. So overall, I have to say, it's a very smooth transition we found. Other teams had more issues than we did, like issues and bugs, but it's a fairly smooth transition. It's a pretty good editing. It's a pretty good transition, and I think it definitely won't be too challenging for any teams. So, is there any questions? Okay, I think
feel free to ask anything to do with the 2019 beta.
That's all we have for today.